A startling undercover video has landed at the center of a storm, one that mixes allegations of clandestine capability, claims about attacks that kill children, and suggestions that the highest levels of foreign leadership could be considered legitimate targets. What began as an activist sting has quickly rippled through the corridors of power, forced an administrative action by the army, and reopened fissures in an already fragile ceasefire across the Middle East. The footage, released by an activist known for undercover operations, shows a man identified as a branch chief responsible for nuclear and chemical surety speaking with an undercover reporter. In the clip, the man is presented as someone whose job is to keep weapons secure and to ensure that only reliable personnel have access to them. He is heard to say in plain language, he says his job is to make sure no unstable individuals get access to such systems. Taken in isolation, that line reads as responsible's even Rene. Assuring description of a safety officer's duty. In context, however, in a public setting and on camera, it takes on a more troubling character. The most sensational claims in the video are explosive. The man is recorded discussing alleged USA's access to chemical agents, recounting an incident involving a laboratory chemist exposed because of supposed negligence, and most consequentially implying that Tehran's top leadership could be targeted under certain conditions. The recording includes what is presented as an admission that U.S. strikes have in the past caused civilian deaths, with the remark that those fatalities were collateral damage. If those words were spoken as they appear in the tape, they cross a line from closed-door strategic discussion to public disclosure of matters that touch on international law, arms control commitments, and the moral calculus of warfare. The United States is a signatory to the Chemical Weapons Convention and has repeatedly declared that it destroyed its declared stockpiles. Any suggestion to the contrary, that nerve agents remain accessible or that an incident inside a government laboratory exposed a scientist to such agents would be deeply alarming and demanded independent verification. Within hours of the video circulating, the Army moved to place the soldier identified in the footage on administrative leave and announced that an investigation would be opened. Officials emphasized that there is as yet no official determination that classified information was disclosed, nor is there confirmed evidence that the statements in the recording are accurate, complete, or free from distortion. Investigations of this sort aim to establish not only what was said, but whether the speaker had access to the information they described and whether any operational security or legal boundaries were crossed. There is another layer to this story that is impossible to ignore: the broader diplomatic and security backdrop. This video arrives at a moment when a tentative ceasefire between the United States and Iran is holding on a thread. Senior figures in Washington, including the president, the vice president, the head of the CIA, and other senior advisors, have been described as wrestling with what to do next, whether to press retreat or seek new diplomatic openings. According to accounts from inside the administration, there was a moment when the United States appeared poised to resume strikes before leadership elected instead to extend the ceasefire and buy time for diplomacy. That choice reflected a difficult calculation. Military force remains a lever in Washington's toolbox, but the political, economic, and human costs of renewed conflict are immense. One White House decision maker reportedly concluded that stepping back offered a better chance for an elusive diplomatic reset, even as other advisors warned that anything short of strong punitive action might be perceived as weakness. Into that, Bridget. To mix comes this recording, a tape that, if taken at face value, would suggest that lines once considered off-limits are being discussed casually in a public setting by someone who may be responsible for the stewardship of the very systems that undergird deterrence. The implications are several and profound. First, the suggestion that American personnel continue to have access to chemical agents and that those agents have consequences described in stark, graphic terms would immediately raise legal and diplomatic alarms. It would invite questions from allies and adversaries alike. Has the United States complied fully with its treaty obligations? If there are residual stockpiles or samples in labs, are they properly secured? And who ultimately has the authority to employ such agents? Second, the tape's reported reference to targeting top political leadership is politically combustible. Any suggestion of planning or even contemplating strikes on a foreign country's highest of vice holders escalates rhetoric into a realm that can rapidly drive both sides toward a more confrontational posture. Even the mere perception that such options are on the table can harden negotiating positions, rally domestic audiences around calls for retribution, and push an already fragile regional balance toward rupture. Third, the admission, again, as presented in the video, that strikes may have killed children and that those deaths were described as collateral damage, cuts to the core of public legitimacy for military action. War has always been accompanied by tragic civilian harm, but when allegations of child casualties enter public discourse alongside claims that senior leadership might be targeted, the political fallout multiplies. Governments, human rights groups, and international bodies will demand answers. The fog of war will be replaced by the glare of public scrutiny. Those are the stakes. The recorded speaker also reportedly discussed missile detection and track, key capabilities, satellite systems, radar arrays, and the ability to analyze speed and trajectory in real time. Those elements are familiar to anyone who follows modern military technology. The existence of sophisticated tracking and early warning systems is accepted fact. But again, the question is not whether such systems exist, it is whether operational details that might compromise methods or reveal classified sensor and analysis capabilities were inappropriately disclosed. Throughout this episode, there are fundamental unknowns. The video's authenticity and the accuracy of its claims remain under review. Context is everything. Were remarks off the cuff, exaggerated, joking, or misremembered? Were they clipped or edited in ways that altered their meaning? Was the person in the footage actually in the role attributed to him, and did he have access to the systems and information referenced? Those are precisely the questions investigators are tasked to answer. Beyond the immediate inquiry, this moment is a test of institutional processes designed to handle sensitive breaches. The Army's response prompt administrative leave and a pledge to investigate is a standard opening move meant to preserve the integrity of classified materials and to signal seriousness of purpose. What comes next will determine whether this episode becomes a contained personnel case with corrective action and perhaps criminal referral, or whether it blooms into a broader diplomatic crisis that compels public explanations at higher levels. From Tehran's perspective, such a recording, authentic or not, is a bargaining chip. Hardliners in Iran will seize on the tape to insist that their leadership is under threat, to justify retaliatory measures, and to push back on any concessions. Moderates who might otherwise be inclined toward negotiation could find themselves boxed in by public pressure and domestic politics and the presence of economic levers, the ongoing blockade of the straw. And if Hormuz tightened sanctions and pressure on trade means that the negotiation space remains crowded with leverage and counter-leverage. Diplomacy requires some measure of reciprocal trust or at least predictable incentives. When one side believes its leadership is being openly discussed as a potential target, trust drains away. The result can be a chilling effect on talks just when dialogue is most needed. There is also an important legal and moral dimension. The Chemical Weapons Convention prohibits the development, production, acquisition, stockpiling, and use of chemical weapons. The United States has publicly stated compliance with the treaty and has long maintained that it destroyed its declared chemical weapons stockpiles. Any credible evidence to the contrary or any suggestion of experiments or negligent handling in a lab setting would demand a transparent, verifiable accounting to reassure partners and the international community. Similarly, the use of force against political leaders carries legal and strategic consequences. Targeted killings of high-level state actors fall into a complex matrix of international policy and national policy. Should the recording prove to reflect real operational intent, it would raise urgent questions about chain of command, legal authorizations, and the potential for miscalculation. In Washington, the political impact will be immediate and raw. Elected officials across the spectrum will press for briefings, for clarity, and for accountability. Congressional oversight bodies will demand to see the underlying evidence. Opponents will seize on any misstep to portray the administration as reckless. Supporters will be forced to reconcile security claims with legal and ethical boundaries. For the president, the calculus is particularly thorny. Projecting strength is politically advantageous, but the costs of misjudgment in the Middle East are not easily contained at home or abroad. For the public, clarity is painfully simple and devilishly hard to obtain. Was information improperly shared? Were treaty obligations honored? Were civilian deaths acknowledged accurately? And if so, what accountability follows? These questions will not be settled by a single video clip or a quick public statement. They will require rigorous investigation, clear disclosure of what can be disclosed without compromising legitimate national security interests, and an honest accounting where misconduct or negligence is found. At the regional level, allies and adversaries alike will parse the tape. Partners will demand reassurance about the stewardship of sensitive materials and the discipline of forces charged with their custody. Adversaries will look for openings, political, informational, operational, to exploit divisions and to leverage the revelations for their own strategic ends. There is one more human dimension to keep in mind. In the rush to indict or exonerate a person on camera, it is easy to lose sight of the human costs and the institutional duties that created the conditions for this moment. Soldiers and officers who handle the most dangerous materials do so under strict protocols because the stakes are existential. When those procedures are followed, catastrophe is averted. When they are violated, even by accident, consequences can be horrific and far-reaching. That is why the investigation must be thorough and fair, and why any disciplinary measures must be proportionate and transparent within the limits of protecting national security. As this episode unfolds, it will be essential to watch for several signs: the pace and openness of the Army's inquiry, whether independent agencies are asked to assist, whether the administration provides substantive answers about the underlying capabilities and the veracity of the claims, and how Tehran responds rhetorically and operationally. Each of those moves will shape whether this becomes a contained personnel issue, a diplom, edifice spat, or a trigger for renewed hostilities. What is already clear is this: secrecy, once breached, can be as contagious as a rumor. In an era of viral videos and instantaneous amplification, a single recording can change the tenor of policy debates, force reassessments of alliances, and alter the course of negotiations. That means public leaders must respond with speed and care, swift enough to prevent dangerous escalation, cautious enough to preserve real security interests, and honest enough to maintain public trust. For now, investigators will have their work cut out. The central questions are not rhetorical, they are concrete. Did the person recorded have access to the claims he described? Were operational or classified methods revealed? Are there gaps in training, supervision, or culture that allowed a private conversation to become public? The answers will determine not only the fate of the individual on administrative leave, but the broader confidence of allies and the why, willingness of adversaries to either escalate or de-escalate. In the days ahead, expect a steady flow of official statements, careful denials where appropriate, and likely new revelations as investigators examine the raw footage, interview witnesses, and cross-check claims against classified inventories and records. Expect also that Tehran will use the moment to press its own narrative, and that regional actors will weigh the risks and opportunities this leak presents. This is a story that sits at the intersection of secrecy and accountability, of military culture and public right to know, of tactical capability and strategic consequence. It will test institutions on both sides of the aisle, and it will test the fragile pause in a confrontation that, at its worst, could spill far beyond the region. For citizens watching from afar, the impulse may be to demand immediate clarity and swift action. For leaders, the requirement is to act with deliberation, to investigate fully, to protect genuinely sensitive information, and to provide the public with as much transparency as security permits. The balance between those imperatives will shape not just the next news cycle, but the stability of a region where every misstep has the power to cascade. In the end, this episode is a reminder that in an interconnected world, a single conversation can touch on treaties, on families grieving for lost children, on the secret architectures of defense and deterrence, and on the fragile threads of diplomacy. How those threads are mended or allowed to fray may determine whether a pause in violence endures or whether conflict resumes with consequences none of us can afford.